just said it's all mine just before you muted. So here we go. All right, good afternoon and welcome to everybody. I'm so excited to see so many of our members interested in learning about innovative ways to get more young women interested and engaged in politics. As Sandy said, my name is Kathi Harper. She gave you a little bit of my background. I will also mention that I have a long history in doing public service work. My BA is in political science, and I have a JD, a Juris Doctorate from Southwestern School of Law. I worked as a prosecutor in Orange County for 25 years, and I was the CEO of a domestic violence agency for 10 years before I retired from the district attorney's office. I'm going to be talking to you today about a program I began in my branch last year that I designated as GovTrek. I say I started it last year, but it has been a seed germinating in my brain for quite some time. Sandy, next slide. So I've been active in politics for as long as I can remember. I've marched in just about every protest you can imagine, starting with Vietnam. So it really hit me one day. I was talking with my two teenage granddaughters, and I was trying to get them interested in talking with me about politics. And this is what they said: "Grandma, we're not interested in politics." Even more astounding when I asked them, "What? Why not?" They then responded, "Politics doesn't really affect us." Their response just blew me away. I thought, if my girls, as involved as I am, and they've seen this as their example their whole lives, if my girls are saying this and thinking politics doesn't affect them, think of all the other girls out there who are feeling the same way. That really got me thinking, we need to do something, excuse me, about this generation and their attitude about politics. Then this year, I was doing some research in preparation for our suffragist tea for our branch, and I came across this quote from Susan B. Anthony: "There will never be complete equality until women themselves make laws." That was my aha moment. It crystallized with me that we must do something to empower young women to believe that they were capable of and in a position to learn how to make laws that do indeed affect them. Next slide, please. So I started doing a little research. I wanted to have a better picture of, just how dire is it? How many women do we have involved in politics, and why aren't we having more of an impact? So I started doing a little research, and I think this graph illustrates the point perfectly. It's from 2016, and I couldn't find a more recent one, but I wanted to use this anyway because it really is very graphic in pointing out the differences between the ratios between the women in each of these different governmental positions versus the men. But I did want to give you the most up-to-date and current information, and I also wanted to see if there had been any progress over time. So I had Sandy add, in the right-hand column under 2020, you'll see the new updated figures. And what you'll see is that a few of these have gotten a little bit better. She highlighted two of them. For governors and mayors, for instance, the ratios have gotten better. But for all the rest of them, in 4 or 5 years, they have really stayed pretty much the same. Next slide. All right, so what is the solution? The one I came up with is GovTrek. And in the way I imagined it and have designed it and implemented it is that this is designed to interest young women in careers in politics and to encourage them to pursue such a career. So today we're going to invite you to journey with us to learn how we at COV implemented this program and how it might be launched in your branch. We're going to talk about a lot of different things: challenges that we encountered, lessons that we learned, and ways that we can improve the program as well. Next slide. So I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about GovTrek, how we designed it, what you need to know, what you need to do, etc. As Sandy mentioned, we put together a whole toolkit, and you'll find that on the web, and it has all the detailed instructions and anything you want to know. But I want to preface it with this. This is not a one-size-fits-all program. It does not have rigid regulations such as tech trek and speech trek. It can be modified to meet the needs and resources of your branch and your community. But the one overriding characteristic is this: it is not a civics class, although it has a civics component. It is not a government class, although it touches on that as well. In fact, it is designed not to be a class at all. The whole structure and the idea of it is to get the girls out of the classroom setting and immerse them into the real world of politics. It is meant to educate, inspire, and move girls to enter the political arena and to empower them to believe that they are worthy and capable of wielding power. Next slide. So the basic concept of GovTrek is this: it encourages young high school women to pursue a career in politics. It immerses students in the real world of politics. It calls and relies on as presenters current female legislators and experts who present real life political concepts. And the reason we really wanted to focus on female legislators is because, of course, we want to give the girls role models. We want them to see women in power and hear women in power talk about how they are able to use it to affect real change. And then the final component of it is that students participate in workshops that are designed to develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Next slide. So this has a lot of components, and I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. It's all very manageable. And honestly, most of this work has been done for you now. It's all contained in the toolkit that you'll find. I'm just going to go through these real quickly, and then I'll go into more detail on each one of them as we go through the slides. So you need to start with forming your team. Then you have to find a venue. You need a budget, figure out how much it's going to cost you to do it and where you're going to get that money from. You have to develop a format that's right for you. Developing the curriculum, don't get too scared about this one. Your presenters basically will present the curriculum for you. All you have to do is come up with making sure you instruct them on what you want to make sure they covered and talk about, and then leave it up to them to do it. Designing the workshops, this was a little bit of a challenge, but we've done those for you if you want to use our models. Developing the materials. Then you have to get the buy-in from the education sector because you're going to be next recruiting students primarily on campus. So you have to have the buy-in from education sector. And then securing your presenters. Okay, next slide. So the first phase of this is getting ready. Next slide. So we're going to talk about putting the team together first. And in each of these slides, you're going to see two sections. On the left, you're going to have what we did and how our program worked. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to see a blue box that will say what we might change. And this is where we've taken the lessons that we've learned and tweaked things a little bit to make suggestions to you about alternative ways of thinking of some of these things. So what we did is we kind of split it up between the duties of the chair, which was me, and then the duties of the committee members. So I took on developing the budget, developing the work plan for the team. I personally did all the written materials and designed the basic format. My team members were responsible for finding a venue, setting up the meetings with the school personnel, making presentations to the students, setting up meetings for the chair to have with the presenters. So what I did is I had my team members make the initial calls to get the appointments and then set up an appointment. And then I went with another team member to have the actual face-to-face meeting with the presenter. Then I also used them to facilitate workshops, and I gave them the title of mentors. And the mentor's job is basically to be there at every session. And when we're doing the exercise to split up and have one mentor with each team to help them work through the exercise projects. And then the same with contacting schools, excuse me, it was their responsibility to make those calls and set up meetings. And then again, I went with a team member to meet with the actual superintendent, whoever the school personnel was. We are very lucky in our branch. I know a lot of branches aren't so lucky. We actually have 8 members of our public policy team. And that worked out fine for us. With the whole public policy team was involved. I would suggest that you not try to do this if you don't have more than 6. If you don't, I mean, if you don't have at least 6 members, there's a lot of moving parts to this project, and you really need a lot of hands on it. So I think 6 would be the minimum. That's when I talked about one of the first things you want to think about is what resources do you have available to you. And I would strongly suggest if you can't get at least 6 members from your branch who want to commit to doing this project, it might not work for you. What we might change is we did stick with just the members of the public policy team, but I will admit not all of them were as equally enthusiastic about the project as I am. Some of them did it because it was kind of an assignment. So if you go outside of that arena and solicit from your general membership, you might find a lot of other members who are would be interested in maybe not doing other public policy work, but might be interested in just this one project. You also might want to think about reducing the responsibilities of the chair. I took a lot of stuff on because it really was my baby, and I kind of knew in my head how I wanted things to go, and a lot of it was already pre-written in my mind, so it wasn't a real burden for me, but you might think about spreading some of those chores out a little bit more evenly. Okay, next slide, please. So the first task for the team is to find a venue. You have to start here because when you start going out and talking to the schools and to your presenters, one of the first things they're going to ask you is, where does this take place? And you really want to have that nailed down. Excuse me. Now this can be kind of tricky because, as I said, one of our motivations, or one of our things we really wanted to focus on, was getting the girls out of a classroom-like setting. But on the other hand, your venue has to have some general classroom-like tools available to you, such as desks or tables for the girls to work on. And tables are a lot better if you can work that out than desks, because again, it's not quite so classroom-like. It has to have AV capability. You're going to be doing slide presentations, PowerPoint presentations, that kind of thing. A whiteboard is really helpful. You have to make sure that you have an adequate room size. And accessibility and parking is critical. For us, this was a real challenge because we're a tri-city branch. So we have girls from 3 different cities, and they're pretty spread out throughout North County, San Diego. And so we wanted to try to find something that would be central for girls in all 3 school districts. We weren't successful. We ended up having to find one in just one city that was actually not that close for the other 2. It worked out okay, but that's something you want to be thinking about. So we assessed potential venues, and we ended up deciding, for us, we have a community college here called Maricosta. And Maricosta has a satellite campus that's mostly for Saturday and evening students. And so we were able to get a very, very workable room at that location. They gave us a reduced nonprofit rate, so it was less expensive than a lot of other venues we were looking at, and it was perfect for our classroom needs. The downsides of that was that it still cost us a bit of money. This is the biggest part of our budget. And we had some scheduling problems. We had some staff challenges, I'll say, at the venue, and there were dates that we paid for, that we locked in and paid for, and like 3 days before, we found out that they were closed on that particular day because they had to follow their regular school schedule. So that's something to be aware of. We were into our 4th presentation, I think, and a staff member of our presenter happened to mention to me, he said, hey, I can get you free government space. And that was one thing we hadn't even thought about or talked to. So that's something you might want to think about up front. Next slide. All right, the next component is budgeting and funding. So one of the really good things about this program is it's very cheap. It's not anywhere near the costs of TechTrek or SpeechTrek. We were able to do the whole program for about $750, which is really not much. The bulk of that went for venue and printing of materials. We applied for the AAUW California State Project Grant. It's a $500 award, and I'm very happy to say that we did receive that award this year. However, it's not granted until April, and the check doesn't come until June. And so we had to fund this program before we even knew if we were going to get the grant. So you need to make a presentation to your board. The project has to be board approved, and I have a proposal in the toolkit that you can use. Our board chose not to allocate the cost from the general fund dollars, and that's because the way we're set up is that all special projects have to be self-funding, like TechTrek. We have to do fundraising for TechTrek and for our scholarships, and they felt this should be treated the same way. So they chose to not agree to allocate general funds unless it was already in our public policy budget, which we have. And if we decided to not use some of those funds for other things, we could use them for GovTrek. They went ahead and agreed to fund it up front, but the understanding was that if we did get the grant, the grant money would go to reimburse the general fund for those upfront costs, or if we didn't get the grant, then we would have to find another way to repay the general fund. So your board may respond differently, but be prepared to think of ways to either cut down on costs, like looking for a free venue, or solicit sponsorships. Next slide. All right, the format. This was one of the biggies. Took a lot of work and a lot of thought. These are some of the things as you're putting yours together that you might want to think about. What do you want to accomplish from this? Are your goals the same as ours? And as I said, in order for it to be a true, what I consider GovTrek program, it has to have at least those basic components. How long will it take you? How many sessions do you want to have? I'll talk about what we did in a minute. And think about scheduling. What is the best schedule? Days, times, amount of time, length of each session. You have to think about your student schedules and workarounds. We'll talk in a minute about the students that we went after. And we really wanted high achieving girls. And of course, with that comes the recognition that they're going to be involved in a lot of other things. They'll have community projects. They're probably involved in athletics. They probably have a tight study schedule. And you have to think about holidays, school holidays, and make sure you're not selecting a schedule that interferes with that. You have to think about who your members are that are going to be working with you and what's their availability. For instance, our general membership meetings are on the third Saturday, so we didn't want to schedule our sessions for that day. And then your presenters availability. And honestly, that is going to be such a challenge when you're dealing with legislators. If you've never done that before, we had lots of last minute changes and workarounds with our presenters, but you want to that's one of the things you want to nail down with them as early as possible to try to get them locked into a date that you can count on. All right, next slide. Okay, so with those considerations in mind, here's what we came up with. And when I say what we did or planned, that's because, unfortunately, thanks to our little friend COVID, we had to cut our first year short. So of our 6 planned sessions, we were only able to do the first 4. And so we'll talk about the last 2 that in terms of what we had planned as opposed to what we actually did. So we decided to do this in 6 sessions, and we chose 6 that was basically driven by what we wanted to cover. So there were 6 components of this that we felt it was critical to the information to get out to the girls. So we decided to do 1 session for each aspect of it. And our schedule was we wanted to start in October. We didn't want to start in September because everybody's just coming back to school, and we wanted to give everyone time to settle in before they were bombarded with our requests. So we did October, November. We skipped December for the holidays, and then we did January through April for our actual work sessions. And then we planned to wrap everything up with a half-day conference in May. So we agreed that Saturdays would be the best. We didn't want to compete with school days and school hours, or even doing it later in the afternoon during the week would be competing with girls after school. So we decided that Saturday was really the only workable option for us. And we decided to do the sessions in 2-hour increments. And we came up with that for two reasons, because each session is split between a presentation and a workshop. So we thought an hour for each would be reasonable. Plus, we're asking these girls to give up their time on Saturdays, and we didn't want to keep them too long. So we wanted to be mindful of that. So we thought 2 hours would work. As it turned out, it wasn't enough, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but that was our plan. So these are our sessions, and we're going to go through each one of these in detail. The first one is sort of a Civics 101. As I said before, we didn't want it to be a civics class, but we did want them to have a basic background and understanding of constitutional government and how it works. The second one we wanted to talk about was the value of a law degree. Now, this one, honestly, was driven a little bit by our membership. We have 5 attorneys in our membership, and 4 of them are on the Public Policy Committee, and including me, I'm one of them. And so we wanted to utilize that expertise as presenters. This is one that you may not feel strongly about. You may not have the resources or the capacity to present something like this. I'll talk about alternative ways that you can get around that if you do. But we still feel that it was a valuable one, and the girls really liked it because they got a lot out of hearing about different law schools and what it took to get a law degree and how that played into having that as a good background for a political career. And then the next 3 were the real meat of this program, and that was how city government really works, how state government really works, and how federal government really works. And then we capped the sessions off with how a campaign really works. So we're teaching them about what real politics is, right? So we wanted them to get an idea of what it meant to really be in the political arena, putting on a campaign, what would be required of you, what were the challenges, all of those things. And then, as I said, we wanted to end the sessions with a half-day conference. We call it a conference. It wasn't really meant to be a big to-do, but the girls were told that they could invite their family members if they wanted, and we wanted to have as much of our general membership come as possible. That was our plan. So we got a bigger room. And then the 2 main components of this was that we were going to have an election of the girls that would come out of the final session on how a campaign works. We'll talk about that later. And then we also wanted them to have a mediation negotiation workshop. We really wanted them to have some training on how to have civil discourse about politics and how to compromise and how to work with people who don't always agree with you for the greater good. So those are the things we wanted to accomplish with the conference. So here's some of the things we might change. We're definitely going to consider an alternative schedule. Especially this year, it's going to be very challenging. I'll tell you right now, we're not going to do this program this fall. But because of COVID, we really don't even know. Our school districts up here or down here still haven't even decided if they're going to be open for in-person classes, and we're just not comfortable being in that kind of a setting, of course. So we're going to kind of wait and see what happens by the end of this calendar year. We're going to see if, what changes with COVID. Do we get a vaccine? Do we get a pronouncement that things are safer for gatherings, et cetera? And if we get that kind of green light, then what we're thinking is that we might go ahead with this in spring, and that would definitely change our format. We would have to do, if we want to stick with 6 sessions, we would have to do them in a whole different way because we wouldn't have the full 6 months to accomplish that. The other factor, though, is at the end of our 4th session, when we had to cut off, we were able to do some evaluations by email, and to our surprise, one of the things we asked the girls about was, what did you think about the way the sessions were organized? Did you like that format? Was doing it once a month good, bad? Did you have any feelings about it? and then how about the timing, the 2 hours? And so most of the girls said that they were fine with doing it once a month, but they came up with some other suggestions. They would have also been fine with doing it twice a month for only 3 months, and then not having it drag out for so long. We proposed weekly sessions. They weren't as hot on that. They thought maybe 2 a month would be okay. But our biggest surprise was that they said they would like to have had more time. They would like to have them be longer. And remember, I said we were thinking they wouldn't even want to give us 2 hours on a Saturday, but almost all the girls said they would have preferred 3 hours. They would have liked an hour and a half for the presentation and an hour and a half for the workshops. So that's something that's a change we're definitely going to make. We're going to go to 3-hour sessions, and we'll see next year. We'll decide by next year if we want to go to twice a month or just stick with once a month. We haven't decided on that. Next slide. All right, and then the next component in the getting ready, getting prepared before you actually go out and start doing stuff is getting your materials together. So there are 3 basic components to this. You want to pack it for the schools, you want to pack it for your presenters, and then you want to just have materials for your user manual that you give to the girls. So we developed a very nice trifold brochure. I'm very proud of it, and that will also be in the toolkit. And feel free to plagiarize. I have no proprietary interest in any of this. I'm very happy just to get the word out. So what I did in those materials is I put our actual materials instead of putting templates, just so you can see how we filled things in and how we did things. But you can utilize them just by taking our material out, and the references that are specific to our branch, you can just take those out or change them to your branch. So we produced a nice brochure. I have an outline to present to school personnel. There's a student application and then a student parent photo release form. We wanted to have pictures of our students to put in our newsletter, to put on the website. And so that's very critical that you get that photo release. The presenter packet consisted of a letter of introduction and a request to participate form, a program description, and then we also gave our presenters the brochure. And then the user manual can be pretty much whatever you want, but the 3 things that I think really need to be in there, and then you can just add to those, but you want to have a schedule right up front of what days you're meeting, and then what your topic is going to be and who your speaker is going to be. You want to have a biography of your speaker, and those are very easy to get. You just ask them for it and copy it off. And then whatever session materials, these can come from doing your own research. They can come from your presenter. All my presenters sent me materials that they felt would be useful to the girls, and so we made sure that those were included. Next. Next slide.
Kathi, we have several questions in the chat that might be helpful to answer now. So Tracy's going to ask those questions. So I'm going to unmute Tracy. Tracy Clark is a member of the communications team and is the incoming communications chair. So Tracy, go ahead.
All right, Kathi, one question here is, did you consider teaming up with the League of Women Voters in your area for this program?
We didn't, and that's one thing that I want to stress is really important. We did do some collaborations. We did them with other groups that I'll be talking about a little bit more. We didn't consider the League because this was such a specialized program in terms of the way that I had it envisioned. But there's absolutely, what I'm going to say is absolutely, if any group that you can think of to collaborate with, you just want to think about how much control you might want to have over the content and how much you want to give up or collaborate with. But you know, groups with experience in some of these issues can certainly contribute.
Okay. A question from Deanna. Why did you want to get the girls outside of a classroom setting?
Because we wanted to give them a feeling of real world. We wanted it not to be just one more lesson that they had to learn. This wasn't about learning, it was about being inspired and being motivated and getting excited to hear from these outside presenters. And we just didn't feel like we could accomplish that in a more classroom setting.
Okay, thank you. How do you prepare girls for the courage to face opposing audiences, courage to go on when they lose the battle, etc.?
Well, one of the things that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to sort of sidestep this because I'm going to be focusing on the students and the sessions themselves. But I think the format that two things. I think hearing from the presenters and their courage, because they talked about the challenges that they faced and how they overcame them. And so they're kind of models in courage. And then the way that I put the girls together in their groups for the exercises, we were very adamant about having them working with people that they didn't know, so that they wouldn't be like, for instance, with a best friend who, you know, in some relationships, you always have the dominant friend. We broke them up purposely so that they would feel like they had an equal voice at that table as with everyone else there. So those are two of the ways that we did it.
Okay. How would this work on Zoom in a pandemic environment, or will it?
As you know, I was asked that question earlier. We chose not to do that. I personally would not do it or recommend it because again, the meat of this program is that personal interaction with the presenters, and you lose a lot of that on Zoom. I'm not saying it can't be done. And if you're really techie sharp, which I'm not particularly, you might be able to carry it off. But you know, if you really wanted to do it and there's just no other way, then there's no reason not to. That's just why I personally would choose not to.
Okay. And why did you decide to not cover county government?
Just because we were so limited, we really wanted to keep it to 6 sessions. Actually, one of the women that I was working with, who is running a campaign for one of our county superintendent positions, said, you know, you really ought to get Tara in there to talk about county government because she's such a great speaker. And we just, for our first time out, we really wanted to keep it to 6, and we had our 6, and so we would have had to have had another session in there. Again, that's one of those great things where if you think that would be useful in your community setting, that you might want to put that in there, substitute something else out, or just have more sessions. But that was our reasoning.
Okay, this next one is a suggestion. How about adding an ethics class and vetting media sources and media platforms?
We contemplated in that final session that at the conference that ethics would be covered in that to some degree. We didn't really, it really wasn't going to be the focus of it, but that is a great suggestion. That's something that could be covered. When we go through the sessions, you'll see some changes that I'm going to make in the first one particularly, and that could definitely be part of that.
Okay, and another question regarding, excuse me, regarding the setting of where the conference or the meetings are being held. Were there any field trips? We
didn't plan any field trips per se. One of our attorneys in our group, and one that was did session 2 with us, she's still practicing. The rest of us are all retired. She's still practicing, and she offered to take at least one girl. Another component of this we haven't talked about yet is that we were going to offer the girls internships, and so she offered to do an internship through her office and take a girl to court. But that's something that could certainly be contemplated, would be a field trip to maybe, you know, as in conjunction with the second session, to do a field trip to a courtroom setting. It's just another moving part, and for this kind of trial run, we wanted to keep it, it's not simple. I won't say we wanted to keep it simple, but we wanted to keep it as simple as we could as we were going through it and learning from it and seeing what worked and didn't work. We didn't want to have so many moving parts that we lost track of what we were really trying to accomplish. So field trips are a great idea. I would encourage them. If you can think of some great ideas, by all means. And let me just say that in a general sense, if any of you, after you've heard this, if you get excited about it and want to do your own program, and you come up with ideas and things that are different than the way we did it or in addition to, please let me know. And I'm going to collect all of those and add those into our toolkit for others to see some other things that were successful, that worked, and give them more ideas.
Okay, Kathi, it looks like most of the questions that are remaining might be covered by some of your future content. So we're going to go ahead and move on. And we'll stop again at the end of the next section.
Perfect. So now we're going to talk about how we actually went about doing, now that we're all prepared, how do we get this thing going? And that involved recruiting our students and our presenters. Next slide. So we started with the presenters, and the reason for this is because we wanted to have them locked down. When we went out to talk to the schools, we wanted to say, as part of our presentation, to tell the schools that, you know, we really knew what we were doing and we really had a program that was going to work, was that, and here's who we have, you know, we have these wonderful legislators all locked down. And so we felt that was the first thing that needed to be, the first thing is the venue, and then getting the presenters. So the three things you want to think about here is who, what, and when. Who do you want to have as your presenters? So I've given 4 suggestions. You might come up with more, but these are the things we thought about. So look at your membership. Do you have members with expertise in any of these areas? For instance, we had one of our members and on our public policy team was a community college history professor. And so we made a decision to have her as our presenter for our first session. Our second session, as you've seen, we had 5 attorneys, so we decided to use them. So think about members' backgrounds, and then do any of your committee members have political contacts? Since if you're going to be working like we did with your public policy team, have they done legislative work, and do they have contacts with staff or other political contacts that they could call on? You also want to think about, does anyone have contacts from your local colleges or universities? These are great resources, and we've used them for other things, and they're always happy to help out if they can work it in their schedules. So those are the 3 beginning points, I think, that where you want to start. If you don't know anybody, nobody knows anybody, you don't have anybody, then you just make cold calls. You just have to pick up the phone and start calling offices. The what is, you need to then contact, once you've decided on who you want, then you need to start contacting their offices to arrange in-person meetings. I would strongly advise against doing telephone meetings. If that's the only way they'll talk to you, then you don't have a choice. But in my experience, the staffers, all the staffers we talked to, were very happy to set up meetings for us to come in. You want to have that one-on-one contact with your presenter. You want to make sure they really understand what you want presented, and you know, get that all nailed down and be there available to answer any questions. You want to present them with a request to participate that has an outline of the program, but then you want to go through it in person as well. You give them a brochure. As I said, you want to discuss the expectations of their participation and then brainstorm with them for additional ideas. The woman that we had from our city council, Corey Schumacher, just had great ideas. She loved the program. She was so enthusiastic, and she threw out lots of ideas for her presentation that turned out to be great. And so that's another advantage of sitting down personally, because you'll get that personal feedback from them. And then the clincher is, of course, you want to secure their commitment. You have to go in with the understanding that you may need to be flexible on the date, but you want to at least get them locked into a date that you can use with some measure of confidence on a schedule that you give to other people. And then when, again, you want to start calling for appointments just as soon as your curriculum is developed, as soon as you decide on your format and your sessions and what you want to have presented, then you want to start making those phone calls to meet with them. You need to have security before advertising with the schools. And then you want to follow up. This is really important. Those offices are very busy and things get lost in the shuffle sometimes. You're not always at the top of their priority list. So you want to follow up with their ledge aides at least 2 weeks before the date. And then I always call the day before and say, are we still on schedule? Everything fine? You have any last minute questions, etc. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, then how do you reach students on campus? This is a biggie. This can be really challenging depending on your school district. It was very challenging for us because, again, we're a tri-city branch, so we had 3 different school districts that we had to deal with. We started in July, which was definitely not early enough, but we had been working on developing this program, and we really didn't have it nailed down until about May or June, I think. So we started contacting the schools in July. We contacted the 3 school districts, and you want to try to get an appointment with the superintendent. That's really where you want to start, because if you start with the campuses, more often than not, your principal will say, well, is the superintendent on board with this? I can't do anything without the super's permission. So just bypass that and just start with the superintendents. So you want to get an appointment. You want to sit down. Again, that personal and face-to-face meeting is really critical, so that you can really explain the program in detail. You can explain what's expected of the schools, what's expected of the students. They're going to have lots of questions because these are their students. Okay, they're concerned about the minors and what kind of information they're getting. So you want to meet with them in person, and you want to request their approval to contact the students on campus, and then also to secure their assistance with school staff. We had one superintendent who absolutely loved the program and said, not only do you have my permission to contact the principals, but I will contact all the principals and let them know that I've spoken to you and you have my permission and that you will be coming. 2 of our superintendents did that. One of them never followed through. The other one did, and it was a great experience. So what you tell them, the people on campus that you want to eventually talk to are the principals, the counselors, and the history and government teachers. The teachers themselves turn out to be your best resource, or it did for us, but the counselors were very helpful as well. The principals, in our experience, were worthless. We didn't have one single principal who was interested in talking to us, helping us. They just basically said, go talk to the counselor, talk to the teacher. Excuse me. When we did talk to the counselors, we asked them to post flyers and applications in their office. Some of them did it, and some of them said they would and never did, and some of them said no, they wouldn't. When we were able to finally get contact information for the teachers, that was the key to success for us, honestly, was when we were able to get a teacher's name and email address. Then we were able to contact them directly and develop a one-on-one. This is where your membership, if you're like us, a lot of your members were ex-teachers and they probably taught in the district for your branches. So utilize them if they have contacts in the school. Get them to make those calls for you and set up those meetings for you. And then what you ultimately want to do, if possible, is go on campus, get a counselor or teacher to get the students together and make a presentation directly to the students. That's the best. If you're not able to do that, then at least you want those school personnel in there recruiting on your behalf. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky. What we might change is we would definitely start earlier in April or May at the very latest. And then work really hard to get more school support. Because we were up kind of a time crunch, it was a bit challenging for us. As I said, one of our superintendents was really helpful. She was great. Then another one was enthusiastic, but no follow through. One wasn't even willing to meet with us. And unfortunately, ultimately, we ended up not even being able to include students in that school district. We got the approval from the superintendent the day before the program was supposed to start, and it was just too late. So we only had one principal who would meet. Some teachers helpful, some not so much. This is going to require a lot of follow. You're going to have a lot of phone calls with messages left that don't get returned. You're going to have emails that don't get responded to. So I'm not saying any of this to discourage you, just for you to be prepared. This, for me, of everything we did, this was the biggest challenge, was getting the schools to help us recruit. So final comment, you might need to be creative in finding other ways to reach the students and not be so reliant on school personnel. Next slide. All right, the students themselves, yay, the most important part of all of this. So here was the criteria that we used. We wanted to focus on juniors and seniors. Excuse me. We felt that going any younger than that, they really weren't ready, we felt, for a lot of the material. We wanted juniors specifically because that's the year when they're starting to think about their careers and about their college majors, and before they started applying and deciding on those majors, we wanted to reach them and give them something new to think about. We wanted seniors because of their maturity level. We felt they would have a lot to, even though they probably had already chosen their majors and already had made their applications, we felt that they would have a lot to offer to the conversations. And plus, we just wanted to make sure that they had this information as they were getting ready to go into adulthood. We focused on US history and government classes, students from those classes. So we were contacting teachers. Those were the teachers that we went after. And then I have AP classes preferred. This is not critical, but we started with a preference for AP students because we wanted students who were serious. We wanted them to come to these sessions excited and ready to really engage and to pay attention and to be part of the discussion. And we felt that students who cared enough about government and history, US history, to take AP classes had sort of proven themselves to have that level of seriousness that we wanted. So that's why we focused in these particular areas. We asked them for a letter of reference from one of their history or government teachers. On the application, we had an essay section, why I want to take part in this project. So we had them complete that. And then this is really important. We put right on the application that by signing this, you are committing that you will attend a minimum of 5 of the 6 sessions. Again, we felt this was really important to the exercise, the workshop component, and you'll see why as we go through the sessions. But we wanted the girls in their groups to develop a cohesiveness of working together, and so we wanted to have consistency in that. And so we really wanted that kind of commitment from them. So we started off with this project, honestly, not knowing what the interest level, as I said, based on my granddaughters, it didn't seem to be very high. So we really didn't want it, we really didn't know what we would, what kind of response we would get. We thought, man, if we can get 15 girls, like maybe 5 from each school district, that'll be pretty good. We got 24 and we were thrilled with that. And that was only 2 school districts because one of them didn't participate. It turned out to be a perfect number for us in terms of our resources and what we can handle, class size, group size, everything turned out fine. Your numbers could be smaller or more. I wouldn't do it. We had decided that if we got less than 10 girls, we wouldn't do it because it was just too much work for everybody, and it would be embarrassing to have our legislators come and have 10 or fewer girls sitting there. So that was our bottom line number, but you can certainly have as many as you think you can get and as you can handle. Okay, next slide.
So Kathi, I think this would be a good spot to stop before the next session. There are several questions in chat, and I believe that Randa is going to be asking those questions this time. Go ahead, Randa.
Thank you. You have 4 questions about it, having to or asking boys to join you. Were you in trouble with that, or did you try that, or why didn't you, and so forth?
There are 2 parts of that. Why we didn't, and why we didn't is because this program is about encouraging women to go into politics. It's not a civics class that boys would have gotten a lot out of if that had been the focus of it. Certainly we would have included boys. This is very, very specifically a project called How to Encourage Young Women to Go into Politics. So that's why we focused only on girls. The second part of that is, did we get pushback from the schools? Absolutely not. And we were shocked because we were really anticipating it. I had instructed my team, or we had talked about some prepared responses. And, we had a whole spiel on why this was necessary and not discriminatory. And we did not have, not at any level, superintendents, principals, teachers, nobody questioned it at all. we had, now it might have helped that two of our superintendents are women, and they were just ecstatic. They said, this is the best idea I've ever heard, and we'll get you all the girls you want. So you may run up against it. It may end up being a problem in other districts, but we did not encounter it. We just didn't have any problem at all.
Thank you. Linda Baker asks, who did your graphics, brochure materials? That's often a major expense.
I designed the graphics, I designed the brochure, and then I just took them to Office Depot because we have an account with them for discount on our materials. So they printed everything, but I designed most of the materials. And thank you.
You mentioned targeting high achieving girls. Any effect or any effort to pull in lower socioeconomic girls? And there was 2 or 3 questions that were in that vein.
Okay, we were very, very sensitive to that. So we were trying to find that balance. We wanted to make sure by focusing on AP students that we would not be end up in an exclusionary posture. And so we discussed that with the teachers, and we told them what we were looking for, but how can we find a balance? In our district, again, it turned out not to be a problem. We had, of our 24 girls, 15, 16 of our girls were Latinas, and we had 3 Black young women, and then we had, and then the rest were white. So we have in North County, we do have a high Hispanic community, a level of Hispanics in our communities, but these girls were they were in the AP classes, and they were just really sharp. So it turned out not to be an issue for us, but again, it's something that you definitely want to give some consideration to.
And how did you address the role of money in politics, or did you?
Can you say that again?
How did you address the role of money in politics, or did you address that?
We didn't address it at all up to where we were in session 4. The 5th session that we didn't get to on running a campaign, I would imagine that they would have discussed that. I'll just say the 2 panelists that I had for that session were absolutely dynamite. They're just really incredible women. And so I told them this is the basics of what I want covered, and you guys design the curriculum. And we never got to that session. So I don't know if they were going to specifically talk about it, but I would imagine that they would. The cost of campaigning and where that money comes from, and that's another place that ethics would have been a likely topic.
All right, Kathi, I think we're going to move on. We do have more questions in the chat. Some of them may be answered in your next slide, so we'll wait on a couple of them. So okay, we can go ahead and move forward.
All right, so now we'll talk about the sessions themselves, and we'll go through each one. And again, we'll talk about how we did it and what we might change. So session 1, we called Civics 101, and I'm going to change that next time. I'll tell you how in a minute. But the idea of this first session was, of course, to be an icebreaker, an introduction, and we wanted to introduce them to us and to AAUW and to each other. And so this session was the only one you'll see that's in this chronology, the exercise first and the presentation second. All the other sessions we did the other way around, but we wanted to start with the exercise here because we use that as our icebreaker. So the format we chose, and this worked out really well. You're welcome to do whatever you want, but I'll just let you know that the girls loved it in the evaluations. They said it was one of their favorite parts. And so we broke the girls up into 4 groups of 6, because we had 24. And then, as I mentioned, I pre-organized the girls, so I had a list of course, all their names, what school they came from, and what their grade level was. And I did sort of a matchup before we started. So what I wanted to do is make sure that in each group, we had girls from both grade levels. So we didn't have one group with all seniors and one with all juniors. We wanted the junior girls to learn from their more mature counterparts, the seniors. We felt it gave the seniors an opportunity to really be in a leadership role. And then I didn't want them, to the extent possible, I didn't want them to be with their classmates, because I really wanted them to have the experience of working with people that they didn't know. And that contributes to using the exercise as a tool for developing skills in areas like compromise. How do you work with people that you don't know, who you don't know anything about their views and their ideas and how they go about making decisions? And so I wanted them to have that experience of working with different people. And then the format itself was, we put them all on a cruise ship, and we specifically chose a cruise ship because the idea was that all of the people on this cruise ship, of course, came from all over the world. They were all different cultural backgrounds, all different ethnic backgrounds, all different languages. Then the cruise ship capsizes, right? So each of these groups have swum to a different island. And on each of their islands, they have been chosen by the other people to sort of be their leaders. This is very initial, right? So they have it's not a government yet, but they've just sort of been chosen or have stood out as the people who can sort of or start organizing things and bring some order to all of this chaos. So the icebreaker was, and the other thing that this accomplished was, and we did this for every session, was that, again, even though we were in a classroom setting, we wanted them to not feel like they were in school. So we immediately, when we arrived, we started putting the desks into circles throughout the room so that they, instead of having them in a row, so they would not feel like they were in class. So they went to their islands and they had to choose a name for their island and a motto. And our suggestion for their name was, we told them to take any two letters from each of their last names and put them together in any combination that they wanted. You can come up with anything on your own, but that was how we did it. It was kind of fun. And then they had to choose a motto, and they had to choose a form of government. So we hadn't gotten to the presentation itself on different forms of government, but it was in their manuals. So we told them to use that, to go into their manual and use that as kind of a reference, and to come up with what form of government did they think would work best for their island. And then we did the presentation. As I mentioned, we used one of our members. She's a community college history professor. And she covered basic constitutional concepts and the Bill of Rights. Now, this is one area where I would change it next time. I really wanted the focus to be more on politics, and I would change it from Civics 101 to Politics 101. I really wanted that presentation to be more about forms of government, political parties, that kind of thing. And she was an excellent presenter. She's wonderful, and she may be on here. She is. I'll be happy to brag about her. She did a great job. The students loved her and her presentation. But it really didn't. It was too much of a classroom presentation. So that's one thing I would suggest to you that you think about is maybe looking for a political science teacher versus a history teacher. Have more emphasis on politics. You can find someone from your local community college or any university that you have in your area. Maybe not a member. Sometimes it's a little bit easier with outsiders to say, this is what I want, and have them do kind of more what you're looking for. Those are just some things to think about for that particular presentation. The materials for this session were, I put in a complete copy of the Constitution, emphasized with the Bill of Rights separately, and then the different most prevalent forms of government I had in there as well. So this was a session that got us initially thinking about changing the format. This one really proved to not be enough time. Part of when we do the exercises, we always want to schedule time for for them to meet and discuss, write down their conclusions, and then have a report back. And we ended up really having to shortchange the report back because we just were running out of, we just didn't have enough time. 2 hours just really proved to not be enough. And then we also learned that we need better coordination with our mentors, as we felt that we all agreed that we hadn't really talked the exercises through sufficiently. So what I did after this one, I started, before each session, I started actually making up a list of questions and ideas and guide to use as a guide for the facilitated exercises. The most important thing with the exercise, and this what I ended up telling our mentors, is that you want the girls to do the work. It's finding that balance where you want to be there as when they get stuck, you want to be there to nudge them along and to maybe give them some ideas that they can think about, but you really want to make sure that the ideas are coming from them and not from you. So that's something that we, as the sessions went on, we got a lot better at. Okay, next. So session 2 was the value of a legal education in a political career. As I said before, I still think this is important. I really think that it is an important background. It's not that you can't be a politician without a law degree, but it really does add a lot to your understanding of how government works and how the role that the law plays in making governmental decisions. We had 5 attorneys, 3 from government, 1 was an immigration attorney and 1 was in private practice. So the things that we talked about was, where did we go to school? Why did we choose that school? What we got out of our degree, and then a little bit about the career, the actual practice of law. And then I did an overview of the legal and judicial system, and I put that PowerPoint is in the toolkit. And then the exercise, and this is really fun. We asked the girls to come up with 5 laws that prohibit some types of conduct of the citizens on their island, 5 laws that prohibit some types of conduct of government, and 5 laws that give government the authority to act. And with every exercise, we told them this has to be specific to your island. Don't be thinking about what would work in California or in San Diego or in the United States of America. What are the issues that your islanders are facing given your circumstances, and make sure that your laws that you come up with are very specific to those conditions. So they had a lot of fun with this. And then the materials that we gave them were a public policy system overview, and then again, a copy of the Bill of Rights to kind of guide them. And again, we said, don't just take what's in the Bill of Rights and write that down as your law for prohibiting government interaction, for instance, but use them as guides and then come up with your own. So what would we change? Too many attorneys. That was a huge mistake. We love to talk, and oh my gosh, it was so, it was corralling cats. I could not get each of them to stop when their allotted 10 minutes was up. I would not have any more than 2, maybe even 1. You might, if you don't have any lawyers in your membership, you might want to go to a law school that might be in your area or close to you, or go to your college campus and get a constitutional law professor. Those would be good presenters. And then I would spend more time with having fewer attorneys. It would give you more time to spend on doing an actual legal overview, and I think that would be a more important use of the time than the way that we did it. Next. Session 3, this was our first outside presenter. Here's a picture of our Carlsbad City Councilwoman, Corey Schumacher. She was fabulous. The girls loved her. She was young and dynamic. She's a national surf championships, women's surfing champion. And she actually was instrumental in bringing about huge changes in the law and in the compensation for payment for female competitive surfers. And so she had a great background, lots of things to talk with the girls about. They just loved her. But the basic format that we followed for each of our outside presenters was give us some background info, and then why did you choose? So for the city government, why did you choose city government? We ask our state legislator the same, and then we plan to do the same with our federal. Why did you choose this particular form of government that you wanted to participate in? And then tell the girls, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And then what were the challenges that you faced as a woman running for office? Corey's also out, and she talked about the double challenges that she faced as a woman and as a gay woman running for office in a fairly conservative district. And then we asked her to talk about, really just tell the girls, what are city issues? We wanted them to get an understanding, why is city government important? How does it affect you for your everyday kinds of issues? These are things that in our experience, the girls really didn't think about. Even a lot of adults that we know don't really think about how important city government is. A lot of times when people think about politics, it's always Washington, D.C. And we wanted them to understand that there was so much more to politics than that. So we had her talk about government structures, what are typical municipal issues, and then how does a city government structure, in your structure, how do you go about making decisions on behalf of your constituents? So she covered that, and then the exercise was 2 parts. So first we gave them about 5 or 10 minutes, and we said, list 10 issues that would be faced at a municipal level, not immigration, not abortion, things that you would face after listening to the Assemblywoman. What kinds of things that are city type, municipal type issues that you face on your island? We asked them to come up with a list of 10, and then for the bulk of the exercise was to choose one of those and then spend the rest of the time proposing a solution. So they had to come up with a solution for that issue with a lot of details. How would you go about it? Why is this a problem? How would you go about solving it? Do you have the resources on your island that you need to actually carry out the solution that you proposed? Where are you going to get those? Who's going to do what? Where are you going to get the manpower that you need? All of those issues. So it was a really detailed exercise, and they just did a great job. Their biggest issues, I might add, was they were really concerned about where people were going to go to the bathroom. So that was the one that every single group wanted to talk about. For this exercise, the materials that we included were Corey's background, biography, and then she provided us with a Carlsbad City organizational chart to talk about the structure of municipal governments. And then the city I live in is Oceanside. I just went on their website, and it was fabulous the way they had it all laid out, because it showed all the different departments that the city is responsible for, and it really gave them a good overview of the kinds of things that a city government would be involved with. So I just ran that off and put that in there. And then Corey also gave us, I can't remember if Corey gave me that or if I got it in research, but the different forms of local government. Okay, next slide. How am I doing on time? About 20 minutes.
Kathy, you got about 20 minutes left, and 1, 2, 3, 4 slides, and some questions in the Q&A, of course.
Okay.
So.
I think I'm good. All right, session 4 was the last one that we were able to do, and this was how state government really works. The presentation was done by our state representative. Now, I should have said this earlier, but this is a good point to remember, to remind you all. One of the things in thinking about your presenters is it's really important that you try to be bipartisan. It just so happens that my district is heavily Democratic. We have a Democratic congressman, we have a Democratic state legislator, and our state representative is a Democrat. So to try to get some balance, our state senator is a Republican, and I actually started with her, and she was absolutely not interested in working with us at all. We just got the complete brush off. It wasn't even, we'd love to help you, but we have scheduling issues. It's just, we just got a blank, the senator is not available. So that's perfectly fine. You don't have to, you have to attempt to present everything in as bipartisan a way as possible. And it's also important when you talk, if you are whichever party you end up using when you talk to them, it's important that you emphasize with them, this is a bipartisan organization. We just want you to present this from, just answer these questions. We really don't want you, if you're a Democrat, for instance, we don't want you to talk about why Democrats are better than Republicans, or why Democrats could solve these issues better than Republicans, that kind of thing. You really want to be careful about making sure that your presenters don't bring that into your discussions. And you want to try to get both sides presented, but if you can't, that's fine. Nobody's going to fault you. We ended up having only Democrats because that's who we got. So, but we did make the effort. Okay, so we got our state representative. Same thing, why she chose state government, what she likes, doesn't like, what were her challenges. And then we asked her to talk about what kind of issues are faced at the state level. So she focused on those kinds of issues. And then we had her do a little overview on how bills get passed. And then the exercise was, again, they had to select an issue. So you can see the progression as we go through. They started off in session one, they were just a chaotic conglomeration of people who had asked them to sort of lead them out of the darkness. And then now all of a sudden they're an actual municipality by the time we get to that session, and they have to start thinking about immediate municipal issues. Now they're starting to organize, and now they've got all their people, everyone who was shipwrecked, they've gathered them from far and wide, from all over the island. They brought them all together, and they're going to be a state now. And so they had to pick an issue that they would be faced with at the state level. And then we asked them to come up with a law to address it, just one law. And then the most important part of this exercise is they had to write a fact sheet. We thought about asking them to write a law, but it would take too much training to get them to understand how you write a law. But what we did do instead was ask them to write a fact sheet. If you haven't worked with legislation before, a fact sheet is something that most legislative offices will put out when they're asking for, when they go out in the community and they ask for support. They'll send you a fact sheet so that you have a basic idea of what the bill's about. And then you can make your decision if that's one that you want to support or not. At the state public policy committee level, that's what we do every March. We go through all the bills that have been produced, and we look at all the fact sheets from the different offices on the bills that are important to our mission. And we kind of mostly make our decisions based on those fact sheets. So I actually gave them a blank fact sheet template. And then I gave them an actual fact sheet from a bill that our committee had worked on, so that they could see that as an example of how to approach each of these questions. And so that was in the materials. They had a presenter biography, a description of the California State Legislature, a schematic for a path of the bill, and a sample fact sheet. We wouldn't change anything. This presentation went beautifully. Everything the way we had planned it was exactly how it came out. The girls did a great job. So instead of giving you what we would change over here on the right, I'm just giving you an idea of what a typical fact sheet would look like, and this will tell you what their exercise was. So they had to come up with a brief description of the bill. What would it do? A background, what led to this being introduced? Did a constituent ask you, bring a problem to your attention? Was it just something that the 6 of you thought of on your own? What is the problem? Why is this bill necessary? And then what is the solution? What will this bill do to fix the problem that you've identified? And then we asked them to think about who would be likely to support this bill. And I should have put in here we also asked them, and who do you think might oppose it? Okay. So really a good hard thinker, and one that required a lot of compromise and a lot of working together, because they initially wanted to work on different things. So they all had to come together to decide on one issue that was really the most important. Okay, next. So that's all the sessions that we got done. So the next two we'll talk about what we plan to do. So the last one was how the federal government works. Now, our Congress representative happens to be a man. He's a wonderful man. I know him very well personally. I did a lot of work on his campaign, and it was actually a woman who ended up being a paid staff member for him, became a good friend of mine through working together on his campaign. And she's one of the people that I consulted very, very early on with, and she gave me a lot of good ideas for putting this together. But because he's a man and we really wanted women, we decided not to use him for this session on how federal government works. But the woman that I'm telling you about, Ellen, said, you know what, Mike's chief of staff is a Black woman and she's young and she would be fabulous. She said she's a really dynamic speaker. And I was really heartened because I thought it would be great to have some diversity for these girls to see. And she was fabulous. She's stationed in Washington, D.C. She works in his Washington, D.C. office, but she actually is from San Diego and she has family here. And so she was agreeable to fly out and stay with her family and do this presentation for us. So the best thing, if you can get a female legislator, we actually thought, well, maybe we'll go to one of our neighboring districts, and because we have female congresswomen on either side of us, but we really wanted someone from our district. So that's why we decided to work with Kara. But you want to try to get a female congresswoman if you have one in your district. So she was going to talk about, give the girls an overview of the inner workings of federal government, again, along those lines of how does federal government really work? What goes on in the halls of Congress? What are the relationships between the House and Senate, between the House and the President? What current issues is Congress working on that her congressman is involved in? And then to talk a little bit about what is the typical schedule of the U.S. representative, give them a sense of what do they really do, what is that job really about in the real world. Okay, so the exercise that we had planned was that they were now becoming an island nation. They have now joined with the other islands and have decided to form together and become a nation. So each group was asked to select a topic that was critical to this new status. So we kind of broke it down. You can do these timings any way you want. I just threw them in here so you get a better idea of what we did. But we thought we'd give them about 10 minutes to come up with a topic. So each team would be assigned to come up with 5 topics. And then we would have a report back and we put all of the topics that came up on a whiteboard. And then we would look for the 2 that appeared on, if there were 2 that appeared on every team's list, then those would be the 2 that would be selected. And then the exercise itself was to have a debate. So we would have teams 1 and 2 face each other and teams 3 and 4 face each other. And on each team, one member would present the pro argument and one would present the con argument. They'd have 20 minutes to prep, to choose a principle and a rebutter and come up with an argument. And then each side would have 15 minutes to do the debate. So again, didn't get to it, so I don't know if it would have worked or not, but we thought it was a great idea. Next slide. All right, then session 6 was the final session before our conference. And the presenters, this was going to be a panel type discussion, and it was going to be this woman, Ellen Montanari, that I was telling you about. And then we have an organization down here called Run Women Run. So try to say that 3 times. It's only a San Diego-based organization, but she told me that there were a lot of cities and areas that had very similar organizations, but they might be called something different. But this is, when I talked before about collaborations, this would be a really good one to think about if you can find something like this. And their mission is to identify women in the community who might be interested in politics and to train them how to run a campaign and to help fund them. So I wish I would have known about them. I found out about them as I was thinking about session 6. And if I had known they existed earlier in the process, I probably would have actually started with them. They were really enthusiastic about this project and wanted to partner with us. And so we were talking about that as far as going forward. But that's a great example of how you can get good ideas from someone else who does this similar kind of work. Okay, they were going to talk about the importance of having more women in politics, the nuts and bolts of running a campaign, the positive and negatives. And again, this is where ethics it would be a good fit for. We're coming in here talking about some of the negative aspects of running a campaign and do's and don'ts, and then give them tips for success. And then the exercise was planned to be that each team would select a candidate, a campaign manager, and a publicist. We wanted to involve as many of the girls as we could, not just have a candidate. So the idea was, instead of the candidate at this level, that we would have the campaign manager make a 5-minute pitch on behalf of their candidate. And then the publicist would meanwhile be designing graphics or a campaign slogan, some things along those lines that she would present. And then the students would vote at the end of the exercise, and they vote for the top 2. And the idea for this was that we wanted to keep personalities. We didn't want it to be a personality contest. So at least 2 of the teams would have to vote for somebody they didn't even know and had worked with, and would have to vote just strictly on the basis of how well they had presented their campaign pitch. And then the idea was that those top 2 would then face off for the presidency, not that day, but at the conference. So that was designed to be one of the highlights of the conference. Okay, next and last slide. So the conference itself, this is the plan. We scheduled it to be a 4-hour event. We'd start off with a little continental breakfast. And then for this purpose, we said that it was okay to have our congressman, our token man, could come and talk. And Mike was more than happy to do it. Mike Levin is our congressman, and he was very excited about the opportunity to do this. And what we wanted him to do at this stage was not talk about his job at all or too much, but what we really had emphasized with him is, we just want you to be a rah-rah. We want you to really get these girls, cheered up. And we thought it would be great, exciting for them to have their actual congressman come and talk to them. And so we wanted him, just more than anything, just to be inspiring and talk about what a rewarding career politics is, and why, in his personal experience working with female legislators, how much they've added to the discussions, those kinds of things. And then we had scheduled a 2-hour workshop. We were originally going to do 2 workshops going simultaneously, but after we decided on what we wanted to cover, and we actually talked to the folks at that organization, we kind of let them run with it. And they felt it would be better to just have all the girls in one workshop covering 2 different things, but within the course of just one workshop. So this was a National Conflict Resolution Center. This organization was given to me by Corey Schumacher. So that's when I talk about use your presenters to get feedback from and brainstorm with them a little bit. As soon as I told her what I wanted to do for the final, she said, "Oh my gosh, I have the perfect organization for you." And they do a lot of workshops for government agencies, and that's how she found out about them. They did one for her city council, but they also do it for a lot of nonprofits. And so they agreed to put together a program just for our project, just for our girls, and because they didn't have anything that was really ready-made, tailor-fit. But I told her what we wanted to. The 2 main things we wanted to cover was how to have civil discourse about politics, and how to resolve conflicts and learn how to compromise. And so this is what they came up with. They were going to present a discussion on the Code of Civil Discourse, and then they were going to design an interactive activity that they felt would reinforce that. And then they do a workshop on mediation mindset, and they were going to tailor that to tie into conflict resolution in the political arena. And then after the workshop, we're going to have the candidates. Now the candidates themselves would have an opportunity to give their speeches, and then that would be followed by an election. And the winner of the election would then have first choice of the offered internships. And so that's the final half hour. We were going to do evaluations, and I wanted to do them right there. My plan was to do them while the girls were sitting there, so that instead of letting them go home and get them back to me if they thought about it. Do the evaluations, and then announce the internships. And we have offers from 2 different offices to work on their campaigns. And then as I mentioned, our attorney also is offering an internship. So that I think that's the last slide, right?
Yes, Kathy.
That's it. So
Yeah.
I have 3:24 on my clock.
I have 3:27, but we're close. So this is Sandy Gabe. I just wanted to say thank you to Kathy for sharing this amazing program with us and for putting together so much detail that you could actually pick up the toolkit, read the presentation, and be successful at putting this together for your branch. You deserve kudos. Thank you for sharing it. I think we might have time for maybe 2 questions. It's going to be hard to narrow it down. There are still several questions in the queue. What we will do is share those with Kathy, and then we'll put together a Q&A document that will be posted on the same place where you got the download of the presentation and the toolkit. We'll put the Q&A document up there as well. So
and then can I go in there and answer those questions?
We'll send you the questions. We'll send you the questions because they're going to go away when we close the webinar. But we will send them, and we can send them out to the participants after.
Okay.
But I think that I think Randa is going to pose a couple of questions that are in the queue right now. Go ahead, Randa.
Yes. Thank you. Did the presenters stay for the exercise portion to provide feedback or answer questions?
They actually didn't, unfortunately. We asked them to. That was part of when we went and talked to them. We said, you know, it'd be great if you could kind of walk around to the tables and answer questions for the girls and be available, but they all had their busy schedules, so they scurried off as soon as they were done.
Okay, and then the last one, it's a really good way to end. Is there a plan to have a follow-up component so you can track these girls as they mature and grow into politics?
There actually is, and it's one thing, thank you for reminding me that I didn't mention, but it was part of the evaluation form was we asked them to give us information about what college they're going to, and you know, that to the request that if your email or any contact information changes, would you let us know? And then we would keep all of that contact information and track them as they went through.
Great, thank you.
And my email information is on this last screen. So please, you know, if there's any way that I can help you at all, if you want to pay my expenses, I'm happy to come and make a presentation to your membership or your public policy team, or in any way that I can help. I just would really like to see this spread throughout the state. So.
Great. Thank you very much, Kathy. And for those who are attending, thank you for joining today. If you want to look at a recap of this, we will be posting the recording on the website as well. So if you have friends who weren't able to attend, other members of your branch that you would like to share this with, that'll be posted shortly as well. And thanks, everybody.